Before we begin, I want you to take a deep breath, inhale through the nose, and exhale slowly. What you're doing right now isn't just a relaxation technique, it's a signal. A signal from your body to your brain that you are safe, that it's okay to let go. Today, I want to talk to you about something that sounds spiritual but is deeply biological, and that is how to let go, how to relax, and how to trust something bigger than yourself, the universe, or what neuroscience might call the unpredictable nature of life. Let's be clear, letting go is not about giving up. Relaxing is not about being passive. And trusting the universe doesn't mean sitting back and hoping for the best. These are skills, mental states that we can train, just like we train focus or willpower. And the science tells us when we learn to downshift from a high alert state and embrace uncertainty, our brain and body don't just feel better, they perform better. So today we're going to explore what it really means to let go, not just spiritually but neurologically. We're going to break down the fear, the tension, the resistance. And then we'll rebuild trust in yourself and in the unfolding process of life. Letting go is a skill, not a surrender. This statement may feel counterintuitive at first. We're conditioned to believe that holding on, whether it's to plans, control, outcomes, or expectations, is strength, but neuroscience and psychology reveal something different. The act of letting go requires cognitive effort, emotional intelligence, and physical awareness. It's a process that engages parts of the brain responsible for decision-making, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. It is not passive. It is not weakness. It is trained, deliberate, and deeply intelligent. Let's begin with the neurobiology. The prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function, plays a crucial role in letting go. This region helps us assess whether something is worth holding on to, whether an emotional reaction is valid or exaggerated, and whether control is truly possible or just an illusion. When we practice letting go of a grudge, of a plan gone wrong, or of a need for certainty, we are engaging this brain region to suppress older, survival-oriented brain structures like the amygdala, which is reactive, fear-based, and constantly scanning for threats. This is why letting go feels difficult. It's because your primitive brain is wired to keep you safe through control and prediction. But modern life and meaningful growth often require the opposite. Letting go isn't an event, it's a state. A state that can be trained and accessed through repeated neural signaling. Practices like mindfulness, breath work, and reflective journaling are not simply wellness trends, they are mechanisms for rewiring the brain. Each time you observe your thoughts without attaching to them, each time you resist the urge to control and instead stay present, you're reinforcing a neural pathway of trust and emotional flexibility. Over time, these pathways become stronger, more efficient. And what once felt impossible to release your grip on what you think should be becomes your new normal. Physiologically, letting go affects the autonomic nervous system. When we hold on tightly to stress, fear, or an expectation, the sympathetic branch, also known as the fight or flight system, remains activated. This creates tension in the body, shallow breathing, elevated heart rate, and a loop of hypervigilance. By learning to let go, we activate the parasympathetic branch, also known as the rest and digest system. This calms the body, slows the heart rate, and allows the mind to become more flexible and perceptive. This shift is measurable. It shows up in your heart rate variability, HRV, cortisol levels, and brain wave patterns. Letting go isn't just a feeling, it's a full-body shift in biology. On a psychological level, letting go confronts a central illusion that we can control everything. Most anxiety stems from a mismatch between what we want to control and what we actually can. When that gap is wide, we suffer. When we narrow it by identifying what's truly within our influence and releasing what isn't, we free up cognitive and emotional energy. This is not giving up, this is not resignation, it is strategic disengagement from unnecessary struggle. It's like releasing the brakes while trying to drive forward. Cognitive flexibility is a key trait here. People who can adapt, shift focus, and release rigid thinking patterns tend to score higher in emotional resilience and long-term well-being. This isn't just psychological, it's trainable through deliberate practice. Exposure to uncertainty, cognitive reframing, and even embracing small failures are ways to build this mental flexibility. Letting go is not about avoiding discomfort, it's about building your capacity to stay calm within it. Emotionally, letting go also requires acceptance. Not the passive kind, but the kind that acknowledges the reality of a situation without trying to edit it. This activates self-compassion, another powerful neurobiological process. When you let go, you often grieve, whether it's the loss of control, identity, or a future you had planned. The brain responds to this grief similarly to physical pain. But when paired with self-compassion, new neural activity emerges in regions linked to safety and regulation. You become less reactive, more centered, and more open to change. There's also a trust component built into this process. Trust in the unknown, trust in your ability to adapt, trust in the intelligence of life unfolding. From a brain perspective, this trust is not blind optimism. It's a learned response shaped by previous experiences of letting go and realizing that not only did things not fall apart, they often aligned in unexpected and beneficial ways. Repetition strengthens belief, and belief changes biology. Over time, the fear that once made letting go unbearable transforms into a quiet confidence, a knowing that even when you don't have all the answers, you are okay. Relaxation activates clarity, not laziness. In a world that often glorifies hustle, grind, and non-stop action, relaxation is frequently misunderstood. It's seen as indulgent, weak, or unproductive. But the science tells a different story. Relaxation is not the absence of effort, it's the presence of alignment. It's the intentional shift from sympathetic overdrive into a state where the body and brain can recover, recalibrate, and perform at a higher level. When we relax, we're not shutting down, we're optimizing. We're allowing clarity to rise to the surface by quieting the noise that clouds it. At the physiological level, relaxation activates the parasympathetic nervous system. This branch of the autonomic nervous system is responsible for slowing the heart rate, increasing digestive activity, and promoting restorative processes throughout the body. When the body is in this state, energy is no longer being diverted to defense mechanisms. Instead, it's being directed to healing, memory consolidation, and insight. These are the states in which creativity and problem solving emerge most naturally. You don't come up with breakthrough ideas when you're in survival mode. You find them in calm, open mental space, exactly what relaxation provides. In neuroscience, this clarity is linked to specific brain wave patterns. When the brain is in a relaxed yet alert state, alpha waves dominate. These are associated with calm focus, creativity, and integration. It's the same state experienced during meditation, deep flow, and moments of peaceful awareness. Unlike the high-frequency beta waves of stress and anxiety, alpha waves support mental clarity, balanced decision-making, and the capacity to see beyond the immediate problem. This is not a shutdown, it's an upgrade in perception. Relaxation also supports the default mode network, DIM, a set of interconnected brain regions that becomes active during rest and introspection. While it's often misunderstood as mind-wandering, the DIM actually plays a role in self-reflection, emotional processing, and future planning. When we allow ourselves to relax, we give space for this network to operate. It helps us connect dots, evaluate priorities, and envision outcomes that rigid focus can't access. This kind of mental clarity is only possible when the brain is allowed to step back from the constant doing. Psychologically, relaxation reduces cognitive load. When you're chronically tense or stressed, your prefrontal cortex is overloaded, constantly managing thoughts, planning, worrying, or reacting. This drains mental energy and narrows perception. Relaxation widens that perceptual field. It allows the brain to reprioritize what actually matters, filtering out noise. It's not unlike clearing a cluttered room suddenly. The important things become obvious because they're not buried in mental debris. This is why so many people report having insights in the shower, on a walk, or during a moment of stillness. The brain isn't off, it's finally working with you instead of against you. Relaxation also helps regulate the emotional centers of the brain, especially the amygdala, which governs fear and reactivity. When we are constantly tense, the amygdala becomes hyperactive. It starts to perceive neutral stimuli as threats, distorting our perception and responses. Relaxation reduces this activity. It quiets the internal alarms so that you can assess situations with more objectivity. This is where clarity begins, not from more thinking, but from better thinking. From a state where your emotions are stable and your perspective is not hijacked by fear. Culturally, we've been taught to associate relaxation with passivity, but research in sports science, cognitive performance, and leadership proves otherwise. Elite performers, athletes, and leaders know that sustainable excellence depends on recovery. Strategic relaxation isn't slacking, it's preparation. It's the ground from which clarity, precision, and power emerge. It's the state that allows you to make fewer mistakes, react less impulsively, and access deeper reserves of insight. There's also a hormonal component to this. Chronic stress elevates cortisol and adrenaline, which are necessary for acute response but damaging in long-term excess. Relaxation lowers these levels while boosting neurotransmitters like serotonin and GABA, which support mood, focus, and clarity. This hormonal shift doesn't just feel good, it recalibrates your entire internal environment for clearer thinking and more coherent decision-making. Even on a behavioral level, relaxation supports habits of clarity. When you're relaxed, you're more likely to engage in practices that enhance self-awareness like journaling, reflection, deep listening, or even meaningful conversation. You're less reactive, less prone to distractions, and more attuned to your inner compass. These are not signs of laziness. They're the foundational behaviors of clarity-driven living. Relaxation makes them possible by slowing the system down just enough for wisdom to emerge. The final point is simple but essential. Relaxation is a learned skill. Just like focus or discipline, it must be practiced. If your body and mind are used to tension, relaxation might feel foreign at first. But with intention and repetition, it becomes familiar. And with familiarity comes access to insight, to clarity, to calm strength. Uncertainty triggers growth, not danger. While the brain is wired to seek predictability and safety, it's also designed to adapt, to learn, and to evolve. This dual nature often creates a paradox within us. We crave certainty, but we only grow when we step outside of it. The discomfort of uncertainty is not a signal to retreat. It's a cue for expansion. Neurologically, psychologically, and emotionally, stepping into the unknown forces the nervous system to reorganize itself, to rewire, and to upgrade. This process is uncomfortable, but it is essential. From a neuroscience perspective, uncertainty activates regions in the brain associated with alertness and adaptability. The anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex are heavily involved when we encounter unpredictable situations. These areas monitor for conflict, assess possible outcomes, and help regulate behavior accordingly. In a stable environment, these regions operate at a baseline level, but when faced with uncertainty, their activity increases. This surge is not a malfunction, it's a sign of the brain entering a heightened state of learning. The brain becomes more flexible, more sensitive to feedback, and more capable of integrating new information. Biologically, this process is tied to what's known as neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections in response to new experiences. Uncertainty is one of the primary conditions that promotes this adaptability. When the brain is exposed to new challenges, unfamiliar environments, or unclear outcomes, it must break out of habitual patterns. This disruption of the known forces the creation of new strategies, new thoughts, and new emotional responses. It's in this space of unpredictability that real transformation takes place. Psychologically, uncertainty challenges our sense of identity. When outcomes are unknown, we are forced to confront the assumptions and narratives we've been holding on to. This confrontation can feel like danger, but it's often a catalyst for growth. When you can no longer rely on old mental models to navigate your life, you are invited, sometimes compelled, to develop new ones. This expansion of self is difficult, but it's how resilience, flexibility, and maturity are built. The very experience that feels destabilizing is the one that strengthens your inner foundation. Emotionally, uncertainty brings up fear, doubt, and vulnerability. These emotions are not flaws. They are indicators that your internal boundaries are being stretched. Fear signals that you're entering territory where outcomes are not guaranteed, but instead of interpreting this as a red light, it can be reframed as a green light, a sign that you are stepping into a space where learning is possible. Emotional regulation in these moments is key. When you breathe deeply, ground yourself, and stay present, you teach your nervous system that uncertainty is survivable. Over time, it becomes familiar. And with familiarity comes confidence, not the false confidence of knowing everything, but the real confidence of being able to navigate the unknown. There's also a hormonal component to this process. When uncertainty strikes, the body initially responds with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals prepare you for action, but when you remain in the situation, when you resist the urge to flee or control and instead stay engaged, your body begins to adapt. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward and motivation, starts to play a role. Small wins in uncertain environments, solving a problem, making progress, gaining insight, trigger dopamine release. This reinforces your ability to stay in the game, to persist, and to thrive in ambiguity. Cognitively, uncertainty enhances attention. The brain becomes more attuned to subtle details, more open to possibilities, and more aware of options. This is why creativity often emerges in uncertain environments. The lack of a defined path invites novel solutions. When you're no longer confined to what is known, you are free to imagine what is possible. This kind of thinking doesn't arise in rigid, highly controlled states. It emerges when the structure is loosened and exploration is allowed. In behavioral science, there's a term called optimal challenge, the sweet spot where a task is neither too easy nor too hard. Uncertainty often places us in this zone. It stretches our capabilities just enough to require effort, engagement, and adaptation. Too much certainty leads to stagnation. Too much chaos leads to overwhelm. But in the right dose, uncertainty forces us to stretch, to sharpen, and to rise to new levels of performance. This is how athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, and everyday people grow, not by staying comfortable, but by staying committed in the face of the unknown. When we embrace uncertainty, we activate one of the brain's most powerful features, its ability to update itself. We allow outdated beliefs, rigid expectations, and old emotional patterns to be questioned and replaced. This updating process is not clean or linear. It's messy, disorienting, and at times exhausting. But it is also how we evolve. The very discomfort that uncertainty brings is the pressure that produces clarity, insight, and personal strength. Control less, align more. This idea challenges one of the deepest human instincts, the desire to control outcomes, environments, and even other people. From an evolutionary standpoint, control once equaled survival. If you could predict and manipulate your surroundings, you could avoid danger and secure resources. But in the modern world, that reflex often leads to anxiety, tension, and burnout. What the brain perceives as control is often an illusion, and chasing it leads to rigidity rather than resilience. Alignment, on the other hand, is not about domination, it's about synchronization. It's the state of being internally coherent, your thoughts, emotions, and actions moving in the same direction. Control comes from the outside, alignment comes from within. From a neurobiological perspective, the need to control arises from the brain's predictive coding system. The brain is constantly making predictions about what will happen next based on past experiences and current inputs. When reality aligns with prediction, the brain feels safe. When there is a mismatch, the brain enters a state of alert. This can be useful in situations requiring vigilance or problem solving. However, when the need for prediction becomes compulsive, the brain starts to resist any deviation from expectation. This resistance creates stress, cognitive rigidity, and emotional reactivity. Control becomes a defensive strategy rather than a functional one. When we shift from controlling to aligning, we move from a reactive state to a responsive one. Alignment activates the prefrontal cortex, which governs long-term planning, moral reasoning, and emotional regulation. This part of the brain allows us to pause, observe, and adjust. It does not shut down uncertainty, it navigates through it with flexibility. Alignment doesn't mean passivity, it means presence. It means you're tuning your internal state to the flow of reality rather than trying to force reality to fit your internal state. This shift leads to better decisions, calmer energy, and clearer perception. Alignment also supports the functioning of the vagus nerve, a critical component of the parasympathetic nervous system. When you are aligned, when your values match your actions, and your body is not fighting your mind, the vagus nerve sends signals of safety throughout your body. This lowers heart rate, reduces inflammation, and boosts immune function. These physiological responses are not just side effects of well-being, they are the foundations of resilience. In contrast, chronic attempts at control activate the sympathetic nervous system. This puts the body in a prolonged state of fight or flight, which over time leads to fatigue, irritability, and health decline. Psychologically, control creates an adversarial relationship with life. You begin to view every unexpected change, every delay, and every person who doesn't behave as expected as a problem to be fixed. This mindset drains energy and limits perspective. You become so focused on managing the external that you lose awareness of the internal. Alignment reverses this. It invites a cooperative relationship with life. You start asking different questions, not how do I make this go my way, but how do I show up fully, regardless of how this goes. That simple reframe opens space for adaptability, creativity, and emotional intelligence. Cognitively, letting go of control reduces decision fatigue. When you're constantly trying to manage every variable, every conversation, every outcome, your mental resources are depleted. Control operates on the assumption that more thinking equals better outcomes, but the brain doesn't work best under pressure, it works best under clarity. Alignment allows you to choose where to focus. You stop reacting to everything and start responding to what actually matters. This improves focus, memory, and strategic thinking. Emotionally, alignment brings relief. The constant effort to control creates a background sense of failure because life will always deviate from plan. When you're aligned, you're no longer emotionally attached to forcing things. You can care deeply and still let go. This paradox is at the heart of emotional maturity, the ability to act with commitment while accepting that the results are not fully yours to command. Alignment brings peace not because life gets easier, but because your internal resistance to life decreases. There's also a social dimension to this. When you live from control, your relationships often become transactional. People become extensions of your plans or obstacles to them. Alignment fosters authenticity. You're not trying to manipulate perceptions or outcomes, you're trying to be real, consistent, and clear. This deepens connection, enhances trust, and brings more meaning to interactions. Others feel safer around someone who is aligned because they're not being controlled, they're being met as they are. On a behavioral level, alignment can be cultivated through reflection and intentional action. You begin by identifying your core values, not just what sounds good, but what truly matters to you in practice. Then you look at your habits, your language, your schedule, and your emotional responses. Where there is misalignment, there is friction. The goal is not perfection, but congruence. When who you are, what you do, and how you feel are in agreement, your system works smoothly. You experience momentum without force. You lead without domination. You move forward without pushing everything into place. Trust is built in the nervous system, not in the mind alone. While many people try to mentally convince themselves to trust others, trust life, trust the process, the truth is that real trust is not a thought. It is a physiological state. It is something the body either feels or it doesn't. The nervous system is the gatekeeper of trust, and if it perceives threat, it will shut down the possibility of genuine openness, no matter how convincing your self-talk may be. To truly let go and trust the universe, you must work not only with your thoughts, but with your body's responses, because that is where the deeper imprint of trust lies. At the center of this experience is the autonomic nervous system, which governs your unconscious physical responses to the world around you. The two main branches, sympathetic and parasympathetic, are responsible for survival and restoration. When the sympathetic nervous system is activated due to stress, trauma, or unpredictability, the body enters a protective mode. In this state, the mind tends to focus on worst-case scenarios, hypervigilance, and what could go wrong. This is the state in which trust becomes almost neurologically impossible. No amount of positive thinking can override a body that's bracing for impact. When the body doesn't feel safe, trust feels like danger. To access trust, we need to activate the parasympathetic branch, particularly through the ventral vagal complex. The system becomes active when you feel safe, connected, and grounded. It's what allows you to breathe deeply, think clearly, and open emotionally. This is not just theory, it's observable in heart rate variability, breath patterns, and muscle tone. When you begin to consciously regulate your nervous system, especially through breath grounding techniques and safe relational experiences, your body begins to remember what trust feels like. And with that memory, trust becomes a lived experience, not a forced belief. Neuroplasticity plays a critical role here. The nervous system learns through repetition. If your history includes betrayal, chaos, or emotional inconsistency, your system may have learned to equate trust with pain. But just as it learned those patterns, it can unlearn them and replace them with new ones. Through consistent somatic experiences of safety, such as conscious breathing, movement, and co-regulation with others, the neural circuits associated with protection can be rewired. Over time, the baseline of your nervous system shifts from defense to openness. This is when trust becomes natural instead of effortful. Cognitively, the mind still plays a role, but it works best in harmony with the body. Once the nervous system is regulated, the prefrontal cortex responsible for executive function comes back online. This part of the brain helps you weigh options, reflect on outcomes, and consider long-term consequences. In a regulated state, it becomes much easier to consider trusting the process because your threat detection system is no longer hijacking your thoughts. You are able to perceive opportunities instead of only threats, which widens your window of possibility and supports a more empowered mindset. Emotions also shape the landscape of trust. Emotions like fear, shame, and disappointment often stem from unmet needs or past experiences that taught the system to guard itself. When these emotions are acknowledged and felt rather than suppressed, the nervous system begins to downregulate. This creates space for emotions like curiosity, hope, and peace to arise. Trust often starts with curiosity, a gentle leaning into what might be possible. It doesn't require full surrender at once. The body doesn't need to leap, it only needs to lean, breathe, and stay present. Relationships are a mirror for this process. Co-regulation is a phenomenon where nervous systems influence each other. When you are in the presence of someone grounded, attuned, and non-judgmental, your system begins to mirror that calm. This is why safe relationships are so healing. They teach the body what it means to feel secure and seen. Through repeated relational experiences of consistency and empathy, the nervous system gradually expands its capacity to trust not just the person in front of you, but life itself. Behaviorally, practices that support nervous system regulation become rituals of trust. Morning breathwork, time in nature, expressive movement, or even moments of silence are not just wellness habits, they are signals to the body that it is safe to relax its guard. Over time, these practices condition your system to interpret stillness and openness not as vulnerability to danger, but as the beginning of strength. This subtle shift redefines trust not as a risk, but as a return back to your center, back to balance, back to your full intelligence. The more the body experiences safety, the more the mind allows trust to take root. It's no longer about forcing belief in something unseen. It's about letting your entire system experience what it feels like to be held by something greater than your own effort. Trust becomes less of a leap and more of a remembering. Gratitude calibrates the